James and Jamila Jones both work from home on Mondays. Jamila takes meetings with other Clearwater Southern executives, while James works in his real estate business in the office right below hers. And the location of their offices means that James can sometimes hear Jamila's meetings. And in one meeting, he hears that Clearwater Southern is in negotiations with Nick King to purchase land for a new cargo station that would serve Spasm Electronics. Spasm is offered to fund construction of the station, believing it will supercharge their operations. James' curiosity is immediately piqued. Clearwater Southern is going to be on the hook for building a significant amount of the infrastructure in the area, making development cheaper for whomever develops in the nearby vicinity. And demand is already strong in the area, considering there are thousands of jobs and nowhere to live. James immediately leaves to visit Nick King to see if the surrounding land is for sale and if anyone else has been inquiring about the land. Nick tells him that of course the land is for sale at the right price and that there has been interest. He also says that he's unwilling to subdivide the land and that any sale would need to include land on the eastern half of Crystal Lake in addition to the land around the future cargo terminal. And he warns James that he better move quickly. He doesn't expect it to take long to sell the property. This leaves James in a bind. He wants the land, but the inclusion of the lakefront property significantly increases the price. And because he has to move fast and wants to keep things quiet, he must pay in cash. He quickly cashes out his retirement account and sells a significant amount of the stock that he and Jamila share, including their shares in Clearwater Southern. With everything sold, he has just enough to cover the cost of the land. And within a week, James is the owner of the land. One evening, he picks Jamila up from work and says he has a big surprise for her. And she's excited. Their anniversary is coming up, so maybe it's related to that. He drives her out to the property and says, "Look, Jamila,
everything the light touches is our kingdom."
She is shocked and asks how it's possible. He explains how he'd overheard her meeting and how he spoke with Nick and how he got the money for the land. And he tells her that he plans on keeping all the multifamily that he develops in the area and that the investment is a surefire bet, better than any retirement account or stock. Jamila's face sours and it's clear that she's enraged. She can't believe that he was eavesdropping on her. That was a privileged, private conversation. And the money? What a violation of trust. And she was supposed to inform her company before a large stock sale. This could jeopardize her job and everything she has ever worked for. James tells her to chill out. They're gonna make so much money she won't have to work ever again. Jamila shoots back. She loves her job. And she says, "I bet you don't know who's looking at acquiring the land." It was the governor. She's gonna be furious and she's gonna take it out on anyone that she thinks got in her way. James is unbothered. Nick told him that even Chuckles is planning on running for office. It's a total clown show at this point, and the polls are saying that the governor's gonna lose anyway. Who cares what she thinks? And maybe he's right, but he probably should care what his wife thinks. In this episode, we're gonna build this new cargo terminal and the small community around it. We'll lay out roads, public services, and parks. However, we may struggle to develop some parts of the community due to a reluctance to work with James because of the governor's influence. And if you think Jamila's overreacting, hit the like button. And if you think James is making a huge mistake, hit the like button for that too, and let me know how you feel down in the comments. Or drop an emoji representing how you feel for the sake of engagement. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. Hello and welcome back to Magnolia County. The very first thing that we're going to do today is lay out some roads. And there are a couple of reasons why I think this is the first thing that we need to do. First of all, I think that this would already be on Clearwater Southern's mind as they are trying to find a location for their cargo train terminal. So they're going to be on the hook for the road into the site, as well as the access roads to their train terminal. And this is going to be one of the primary reasons why James is actually interested in developing in this area in the first place. Ultimately, a developer is on the hook for bringing utilities to their site and building roads to their site, and that is really expensive. In fact, it can be a reason why a developer can go under if they aren't careful. So by having Clearwater Southern bring all of this to his sites, he's going to save a ton of money and he's not going to be exposed to nearly as much risk. After that, we're going to build out the entire network, though. I don't want to just build out the road going to the cargo train terminal. We're going to make this cohesive and we'll break up the network as we build James Community. So let's begin with that. But actually, before we do that, it looks like we've got to buy a tile right here. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. Now we have basically the entire space that we'll be working in today. And we're going to be using our terrain to guide many of our decisions. The very first thing I want to do is have our main street in this area. And what I think we'll do is just kind of cut diagonally through here. And I'm going to back this a little closer to the bluffs so that our throat length for the road over here is a bit longer. That would be important for queuing distances. And I think we'll go with something like that. And then I'm going to turn off snapping to zoning cell length because I want to find the center of this road right here, line it up nicely, and just turn it right in. We're going to keep this road. I have a feeling that we're going to use it, although that bump needs to be resolved at some point. And then eventually we are going to make a connection into what is Power Street. going straight to Spasm. This will ultimately end up being the main route that is taken to get to the cargo train terminal. Next, let's think about where this road goes. Now, we have to remember that James also purchased this property as well. So he's going to be thinking about that as he is platting out some of these roads. So we are going to have a road that basically slingshots back here. And I think we'll go with something like that. We just need to find a way to make these two roads connect. So I'm going to switch the location of this, or the angle that it's coming in at. And we use the continuous tool to send this up this way. And then I'll use the simple curve tool to have a nice gentle curve in. We've missed the power lines, and that was the main thing that I was thinking about there. Now, for this area, I'm going to go with a number of these alleyways. Now, I know that I've been pretty disparaging about using alleyways as local roads, but ever since doing it in Bailey, I've begun to like it more. The main reason for that is it gives a clear delineation between what is our main arterial in our community and our local roads. So we're going to go with this. I'm going to go with blocks that are about 5 units deep, maybe 15 long, and we'll break these up as we have to. And I think as far as our basic roadway layout, this is what we are going to go with. You know, there are things I'd like to do right here, but this is where our cargo terminal is going to be. Maybe not the most obvious spot, but I think it's probably where it's going to line up the best. There are a couple of things I want to change though. So I mentioned this connection into Power Street. I think we've got to make that. And I want to make another connection out of this area. And you can kind of see, so I've taken what is part of our Jeffersonian grid and I've upgraded this to be one of those 2-lane roads. And I might try to find a way up the side of the bluff to make this connection here, because this could be a valuable connection down the line. So, or honestly, it could end up being a valuable connection right away. So we are going to make both of those, but let's start out with Power Street. This one's a little bit easier. What we're going to do is back it out to about here. I'm going to pause this momentarily. I don't like doing that, but I think that we have to in this instance because I don't want to lose any properties here. Actually, look at that. We're already going to lose it, so I'm not going to worry about it. We're basically severing utilities over here, though, and that was the main reason I was considering that. But we are going to slope the terrain between this road, go with a really modest brush. Right mouse click here, left click here. This is going to be a really steep slope. My guess is 12%. 11.3. That's pretty steep. But we're working with the terrain, and what we'll do is just line this up, send this all the way back, and then we'll reestablish our connection here. That's it. Let's see if we can use our complex curve to make a nice connection in between this road here and this existing intersection. And there we go. That should bring back utilities, and then we'll just pretend that that house never disappeared. And then the very last thing I want to do is, of course, upgrade this street. Now we'll need to look at turning lanes at the end, but for the most part, this should do the trick for us. And I think I may even leave it looking carved in like this. But there we go. We'll make it look like I did a little bit cleaner of a job. I like the way that that looks a lot. And now for our secondary connection over here, this one is going to be probably a little bit more challenging. So I'll just take it back a little bit further because there's no development out here. And then I think for this one, we will smooth things out. That's a little ugly. That connection's a little bit ugly, but we're going to figure this out. I think we'll probably turn this into a highway heading towards the university. This would likely be a county highway or something of that nature. So that should clean it up a bit. And there we go. That is going to be an important connection here as well, because that will ultimately provide access to the highway system. So very important connection indeed. And I think that this leaves us with a fairly solid foundation for this community. So let's move on to establishing our cargo train terminal. Now for our cargo train terminal, we talked about putting that right here, but the more I look at this, the more I can't help but think that we've got to adjust something because there's just not enough space to get this thing in place and have a track that leaves it. Let me show you what I mean. So we're going to need to connect up right over here with our train line. And I've been thinking that we'll send this train line along this island, up and over our highway and Power Street and into our facility. But as we look at this, there's just not enough space when we place this facility there. You can see that the line would basically hit that bluff right there, which is not what we want. Now, if I were to place this right on our main drag, then maybe, just maybe it would work, but we don't want this on our main drag. So what I think we're gonna do is shift our main drag down just a little bit. The other option would be obviously to put it on this side, but it doesn't work with the asset because of the way that the train line comes out it. So let's place this right here. And then I'm basically going to shift Power Street down. And then we'll use our complex curve to clean this up. So a little bit of a mulligan there. And by a little bit, I mean a pretty huge mulligan, but it's absolutely what we need to make this work right.
No, God, please, no, no!
Could do to try to make this look a little bit better, and we may do it. I think that we might shift our grid and try to navigate around this. So let's make a couple of modifications. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. We might sever this. Maybe we'll do something special over here to try to make something that makes a little bit more sense. Maybe this is actually where our elementary school goes because we're gonna need one of those. But in general, I like this a ton more. But ultimately, the reason that we did this wasn't to have a nice wavy roadway layout. It was to make sure that this line right here doesn't tunnel into the hillside, because ultimately there's no way that Clearwater Southern would ever agree to that. What they might agree to, though, is a bit of smoothing right here, hauling dirt away. I think we can get away with that. So that's what we'll do. And I think I'm going to stop right here for a moment, because I really think we need to think about how we get over here with our main line, or our main spur line over here. So the first thing we need to do is buy this tile and start to think about how we get from here to this island. And through the power of editing, we now have that tile. So let's get our first bridge in place. And what I'm thinking is we'll try to not drop from this height at all and go right over here. So I'm going to steal this height right here, go at a really small brush size, and try to carve in here. So that is where our train track will go. And then I just want to send this all the way across without it dropping down, which means we're gonna have to do this in small segments, unfortunately, because of the way that the tool works. So I'll have to take my elevation step really low. Try to keep this around 0%, or as best as we can. And that's pretty good. And now we can make our connections right in. And there we go. That should do the trick for us. Now we need to get this thing over there. So I'm going to angle this right across the water. And again, for this one, we just want to make sure that we aren't dropping down. And the main reason for that is we want to get over the highway. And honestly, that's way too high. So we do want to drop down some. I take back what I said. Oh, it's because we have that bump right there. So we'll give that another shot. Honestly, maybe we just find where we're going to cross this highway anyway and go as low as we can, which is going to be probably 7.5. And then we'll use our curved road tool, or attempt to anyway, to make this connection. And there we go. That was a 2% incline, but that looks very, very clean now. So we'll have one more curve, and we're going to try to drop this down. And I can already tell that we're going to need to start our incline back here. And honestly, this would make sense considering we had our hill back here anyway. So let's just give this a shot. And I'm going to try to get this to 2% over here.
Serenity now!
And there we go. Holy cow. I had to do a lot of roadway modifications to make that work. And now we aren't even connected over here. So I guess trying to save this wasn't in the cards for us. So not the end of the world. We'll just get rid of that. And I had to make one more connection so that we don't have a gigantic cul-de-sac out here. Just a kind of slight cul-de-sac. And that should do the trick for us. And now that we have all of this established, let's build out the rest of the roadway network back here. And the main thing I want to do is prevent cul-de-sacking. And what I'm thinking is we'll have to run a road basically all the way around this. Otherwise, it will be a cul-de-sac. And I want to make sure we've got 2 roads going into each of these valleys so that we don't have cul-de-sacs there either. And there we go. I think that that'll do the trick for us. The one thing I'm really not so sure about anymore is this is supposed to be Power Street, and it's doing some pretty crazy stuff here trying to accommodate for the roadway layout modifications that we made. I think we're just going to simplify this and do something like that. That really cleans this up quite a bit. Okay, I've just got to step away from the road tool because I am going absolutely ham today. It's one of those times where little things seem just a little bit off, and I just want to keep iterating on those until they look just perfect. And sometimes you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. These roads look pretty great. I'm pretty pleased with the way that they're turning out, and extra iterations isn't necessarily improving things. It's just adding complexity. Though I do like the roundabout. That is good. That is a good improvement in my mind. And then lastly, with this thing in place, we've got to make it operational. So let's create a cargo line. So we'll begin that line right here. I'm going to send this out to Duluth first, and then we'll send this all the way over to Nicolet Bay, and then we'll end it right here. And we've completed that new line. And now I want to make sure that we name this right away. And we'll make that Spasm to Duluth and Nicolet Bay. Now, I'm curious. This is 3 trains, and I think we'll probably be okay. The one thing I've got to check, I've got to see the color of this business so that we can name it. It looks like it's a nice tricolor, and we've used all the colors except for yellow. So we'll go with a nice, vibrant yellow. Now, I want to take a look over at our train yard just to make sure that we aren't going to run out of trains. It says we've got 11 out of 15 in use, but I'm going to speed this up for just a couple of minutes to see how we're doing. And honestly, I didn't need a couple of minutes. I can see already it's 11 out of 15 and it's not changing. So we are in a good spot with trains. And then here we are back at our cargo terminal, and we can see the train coming in right over the highway. And ooh, we've got some ugly stuff over here to fix. It's missing a pillar. But for the most part, besides that, this looks pretty darn good. This would be a really interesting look to this community. Something that I think you'd see train spotters and things of that nature, which would be a lot of fun. So let's get this fixed. This should be a simple one. I think we're going to pause it for just a moment. And I believe that this segment is fairly straight. So it should be just as simple as drawing that across. Yeah, there we go. Fix the pillars. Everything is looking good here. And then right here, I know that I smooth things out way too much. I think it's a symptom of where I live, but I'm going to do it anyway right here because I think it's going to look a lot better. And the main reason I want to do that is reasonably, they would have likely used the hillside to get a little bit of height right here, and we didn't do that. So this at least helps us emulate that a little bit, and I like it. I think it looks a lot better. And now with our cargo train terminal operational, let's add some zoning and city services. Now in the intro, I mentioned that there are going to be a number of businesses that are going to be unwilling to work with James or this little community. So what we're going to do is kind of leave Power Street relatively hollowed out from the standpoint of commercial and offices. I will have some industrial, thinking of those as maybe warehousing or something of that nature. In fact, we'll probably make sure that's the case. So I'm going to go 2 units deep all the way along here with warehousing. And then Power Street, we're going to have a lot of vacancies. So we'll have some of our residential, but a lot of the other stuff we'll leave completely empty. And there we go. We've added a number of row homes along here, a couple of medium density buildings, and these would obviously be owned by James. And then there's a lot of vacancy. So these vacancies are sites that are potentially zoned for commercial or offices. And there's just no one that we can attract here because of James' relative unpopularity. So maybe we'll have a couple. I've added one over here, and I'm likely going to add one more. Obviously, there's always someone who's willing to bite, but the governor's well connected. And as a result, we're going to have a number of spaces stay completely vacant. And I think maybe we'll do the exact same thing with maybe one office space. And then over here, I've started to taper down the densities. So we've got that mid-rise, we've got some row homes, we've got that one office, and then this is a bunch of single family homes right along Power Street. You might wonder why that would be the case. And honestly, it's because you see stuff like this. In small towns, you will often see single family homes fronting a main street in the place that isn't the downtown area. So that's what we're trying to do over here. And then for the rest of this, it's going to be much of the same. Single family homes all over the place. But before we do that, we need to add some of our city services because I don't want to lose track of those. So obviously we're going to do a firehouse right away because we have to. And then I'm going to move along to a police department. And maybe this is where we have an irregular parcel like this. Maybe that's where it fits. So we'll get rid of that and we'll place that right over here. And then I kind of like this parcel over here for our school, very centrally located. I think we'll place that right there and then try to send a road and a roundabout up to this. And that was probably a little more work than it was worth, but I like the overall effect, although it's a little bit off. It's going to drive me nuts. We've got to get this completely perfect. Oh my goodness. We need to move it so bad, but we are going to be just fine. That's going to work out for us. One thing I am going to do, because there's a school right here, is make sure that we have sidewalks. Now I know that Sims can walk on the side of these alleyways, no problem. But I just think that because this is a school, we would expect a little more. So there we go. That is our little bit more. And obviously we'll get rid of that retaining wall in just a moment, but for the time being, I'm a fan. Oh, what I'm not a fan of is anytime you use a path, you upset the apple cart somewhere. There we go. Things are looking all right. We're going to adjust all of the surfaces, so I'm not going to worry about that overlap right there, and obviously this one doesn't look good either. We'll fix all of those, but that's in a moment. For the time being, let's make sure that we've got a playground, and we'll pop that on the side over here. And then I want to think about healthcare and death care. And for our medical clinic, I've been thinking about this site over here. We've got this road walnut that goes up here, but I don't know that we need it. Maybe this is the ideal home for kind of a medical complex and a cemetery, because I like being morbid like that, apparently. Unfortunately, to be morbid like that, you've also got to leave space, which I'm also notorious for not doing. So we are not going to do that. We will place that maybe over here. If we sever Autumn Lane, we could have our crematorium over here. Oh my goodness. It's just not working there either. It seems like the city just doesn't want a crematorium, which I know is the wrong approach. So one more attempt. I got rid of all the roads right here, and now we will be able to fit this in there. And of course, that's not going to work either. It's one of those days, friends. There we go. That'll do the trick. It does leave this with a fairly considerable cul-de-sac, but it's going to be just fine. I'm not worried about one major cul-de-sac, especially if there isn't a train track completely blocking the connection. That's my primary concern. And now before we zone in the rest, I'm going to add some parks. And obviously, we've got to add a dog park here because everyone loves a dog park. And that's the way that you make living this close to a cargo train facility palatable. Dog park. Then everything's fine. And I think particularly in this parcel where there's not going to be a lot that's very suitable, we're going to have parks over here. And we're going to try to make this something desirable out of a place that would be fairly undesirable. Now, honestly, seeing this configuration makes me wonder if we could make this better by bypassing validation results. So in the dev menu, I'm under simulation. We'll click bypass validation. And what we should be able to do then is pop into our pavement path and just draw one. And it gives you the red, making it seem like you shouldn't be able to do that, but it still works, so we'll go with it. And there we go. It's not perfect. We'll need to adjust the surfaces and whatnot, but honestly, this is probably the best that we could do with the tools that we have. Now, we've always got to make sure that we disable bypass validation because we can cause all sorts of issues if we don't. But once we adjust the surfaces, that's going to look really nice. And then I think I'm going to add a few more of the small playgrounds to these different neighborhoods over here because you'd expect to see that. And then near our downtown, I want to have more of our active uses. So imagine people coming downtown to play some tennis, some basketball, things of that nature. We'll have those all down here. And there we go. And I've extended this trail network out, and you can see the intent is for this to connect. We don't own that one tile, so it's not going to happen for us today. But generally, it's trying to add a bit of an amenity to this area that would be really nice to have. And honestly, part of me wants to extend it out even further and maybe loop up with this. I could see that being part of the master plan to really sell this as a desirable place to live. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll make a little bit of a mulligan on the fly. And truthfully, some of these sorts of changes are some of the best ones that you can make for your city. And there we go. Now we have this trail system that goes throughout most of the community and would link up both sides through this back end right here without any roadway crossings. I could see this being incredibly popular at some point in the future. But for now, we've got to fill in the rest of this with zoning. So we're going to go with single family throughout most of this. And I want to alternate back and forth between European and North American like I like to. So let's begin back here. And again, I want this to feel like it's multiple developers working on this. So we'll try to go a few houses in a row and then switch back and forth. The one thing that's frustrating, again, I can't see where the contour lines are. So I'll need to flip back and forth to make sure that I'm not chewing into the hillside all that much. After giving this some thought, I'm actually going to go a little bit more dense along here. This is a fairly loud, kind of undesirable location. And I have a feeling that you'd end up seeing multifamily or something like that in this area as a result, with the park balancing it out, but it's still not ideal. And then I rounded things out with a couple of single family homes right here. We're going to have a different set of considerations right here. I think we are going to go for it and have a bunch of single family homes right here. However, I want smaller homes, so these will be more affordable housing. Now over here, I think we're probably going to divide these in half and do something like this, and more affordable housing just by the nature of the size of the homes. And along Power Street right here, we're going to completely avoid zoning. So I'm going to actually put up a temporary key wall right there. Same thing here. There could be zoning right here, but I want to keep it a ways away from the trail. So if we do that, I'm going to be very deliberate. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. Now, I'm spending a lot of time on the zoning, so I think I'm going to speed run through some of these. So hold on to your butts. We're going to go real fast. And there we go. We're filling in quite nicely. I want to point out a couple of choices that I made, though, that might not be super obvious. So along this road right here, which again is a highway, I faced all the zoning towards the hospital. And the main reason for that is there'd just be a lot of traffic right here. And I think we need a row of trees or something like that to prevent the sound from spilling into these homes. I've also decided to do the exact same thing right here. No zoning along this street. And I've left a couple of areas without any housing. And the main idea there is that we are going to have some walking paths through here and try to preserve some of the forest that's already there as an amenity for this community. And then obviously I went a little overboard on some of these. We'll have to do a little bit of grading after the fact, not the end of the world. And then we'll do the same thing here with a thick a thick row of landscaping, and we'll need to do quite a bit along the finger hills as well. But for the most part, I think that we're looking good. Now, one thing I do want to do before we move on is get rid of this building with the smokestack. The idea here was to have a bunch of warehouses, and I can see some of these visually. Like this one right here is a warehouse storing grain, and you can see how much is in here. So for any of these that end up with smokestacks or that look like this, where it's actually a manufacturing use, we may want to go ahead and play a little bit of whack-a-mole. But if they don't have smokestacks for the time being, I'm probably going to leave them, and we'll see what comes of them down the line. The main reason for that is I don't want a bunch of pollution, and I don't want the smoke. It looks bad, so we're gonna avoid it, especially when these sorts of uses are that close to our little downtown right here. And then I wanted to point out that I didn't do anything over here, and the main reason for that is it just feels a bit removed from the rest of this community. So I think that we'll focus on this area when we start to think about the rest of James Land in a future build, because I do think that we've got to tie this area right here into Crystal Lake. So we've got to think about that a little bit more if we want this to feel cohesive. And with our little community filling in, let's move on to a little bit of landscaping and detailing. To kick off our detailing, I want to focus on parks and service buildings. So for our parks, I want to make them feel cohesive and like large parks. So that means extending some of the surfaces in here and actually making this little triangle feel like a park. And then for some of our service buildings, I want to extend out some of the surfaces so they feel like they're on large parcels, not just randomly plopped in the middle of nowhere. So let's get started. And there we go. We've got most of our surfaces adjusted for our parks and our service buildings. And what I've tried to do here is just make sure that these all feel like large parcels. Now, there is one thing that I did that's a little bit unique, and I want to point it out. So basically for the elementary school, I ended up grabbing one of the surfaces for this playground back here and stretching that out to go from basically all the way over here to way over here. And the reason I did that is you can overlap surfaces that come with an object, but you can't overlap surfaces that you place yourself. So if you plan on overlapping or you want to go a little bit faster, that is a technique that you can employ, and it works really well. Next up, I want to go through and adjust some of our roads and do a little bit of detailing there. So adding trees to Power Street and getting rid of stuff like this inadvertent retaining wall along Birdsong Lane. I'm also going to add some sound walls along the highway. The idea there being that we are resting above the city, so all that noise would come straight down, so sound walls would likely be warranted. One thing I'm going to also need to do is turn on bypass validation so that I can place this outside of the city boundary. That's another thing that I figured out. I was able to turn on bypass validation and connect this path right here, do the exact same thing back here with this sound wall. So let's get moving on that. And now I want to target some landscaping that's very dense in places that I would expect to be very loud, like right behind here. This would likely be something that would make these lots more saleable, and also likely something that the homeowners, if wasn't planted for them, would likely want to do themselves. Now, one trick I'm going to use here, I don't want to plant elderly trees, but I want to see how close these are going to be when they're old. So I am going to just go ahead and dry fit this with elderly trees and see how close I can get these, because I want these to basically grow into one another. And it looks like 6.4 meters is what I'm looking for. So now I will take that back to child trees. And we'll do something like that. I had to get rid of this house though to make that work, because that's the height of realism. So we're gonna roll with it. It's not the end of the world, I guess.
It's only a game.
The next spot, just like that one, is gonna be right here along the backside of the cargo terminal. And I would expect that you'd want to see this there as well. So we will just go with a real dense line of trees once again. Then I did the same thing right here, though I am going to likely spray some trees back here as well. This is just to make sure that we have some really dense landscaping to cover things up. And then finally, before we spray our trees, I want to go through and find these parcels like this that are carving into the hillside. And it's going to be fairly simple. I just want to go with a fairly moderate brush size. Maybe we'll go like a 40. Right mouse click the lot itself, and then just go along the lot to make sure that we have a flat lot. Now I am going to taper these because that's kind of what we're doing in this build. I know that it bothers some people, and in certain climates and geographies, it might make more sense not to do this, but at least where I live and this part of the world, it's very common to do this sort of thing, to go through and smooth things out after the fact. There we go. That's looking a ton better. The very last thing that we're going to do in our landscaping and detailing is spray some trees. We've got to make sure that we've got some dense landscaping basically all the way around these finger hills, as well as in between our lots. And there we go. We've added just a ton of landscaping. So this will definitely increase the flammability of the area, but it will look absolutely lush when it grows out a little bit. And that's one thing I wanted to point out. We definitely are going to start using some of our baby trees throughout the build so that we can see that progression over time and see what we've planted versus what was naturally there. And now with our landscaping done, there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. And now let's make a couple of fixes based on your feedback. But before we do that, I want to point out a couple of things that I've done globally throughout the entire build during the tour. The first thing that I've done is I've gone through every single farm and made sure that wherever the driveway is, the road lines up. Now, I know this might seem like a small thing, but many of the farms didn't have the road in the right place. And the result of that is that some of the farms weren't having their trash picked up. There were no vehicles actually going to the farms themselves, and they weren't operational. So I found out that by adding this, you can make all the farms work. But unfortunately, when the driveways are off to one side like this, you end up in a position where the building says it's not connected if you line up the road with the access to the building. So you have to have one of these silly roads going to the front of the farm. So just something to be aware of. So I've done this with every single farm. But there's more. I've gone through the build and also fixed the lane mathematics around a couple of interchanges. In specific, this one was mentioned on the Discord, and it was mentioned in the comments as well. Along with this one over here, we had extra lanes in a couple of spots. I've just gone through and fixed those. And I want to thank you all for providing your feedback after looking at the save. Anything that you see that needs to be fixed, let me know in the comments, and I will go through and fix these things. Appreciate the feedback. But the thing I asked you for the most feedback about was naming of the towns. So we're gonna go through and name all 8 towns really quickly, starting out with number 1, which James wants to name Plainview. Next, we'll go with number 2, which Ben Randall would like to name Lakeview, since you can see the lake on both sides. Love that. For number 3, Frenimus wants to name this one Superior Heights. Great name. Frenimus, thank you so much for the support. Appreciate you. For number 4, Des wants to name one New Holland, so we're gonna go with one right here. This is New Holland. And I love names like that. There's so many of them throughout the Midwest. For number 5, Enemy Like Mine asks to name a district after their father who has recently passed, and I would love to do that. I appreciate that, and I hope that you're doing all right. We're gonna name this district Mossman. And now we're way over by the town of Bailey, and I wanna name these, but I wanna know what's going on right here. Holy cow. There are cars all over. A car. Wow, the trailer fell off. This is a wild accident. Well, no surprise that there is a gigantic traffic jam right there. Anyway, we are going to rename these districts. So starting with number 6, Pancake recommends Ames and says they want to name it Ames because of the number of Amish people near Ames, New York, and they wonder if there are a number in the Midwest. There are a lot of Amish people in the Midwest. In fact, for undergrad, I ended up driving behind Amish people when I would drive to the university. So that was something I had to do because I lived in a different town. Very, very common here as well. And though Zanuck wanted to name number 6, I love the name so much that we're going to move it over to number 7. This is Piedmont, which is in French, Mountain's Foot, and it acknowledges how beautiful the mountain is. I absolutely love that. Excellent name. And then finally, we're going to take another name for number 6 and move it over to number 8. This is Red Sailor's name, Pennacook, which is an Algonquin word that means at the foot of the hills. Love that one. And you might have noticed that I missed putting township of before each of the towns, so I've gone through and added that. And there's one more thing that we have to name, and that is the little community that we just built. And we have the perfect name for this. This comes from Marquisha Sparkle, Hidden Brook. That's because there might have been a stream that was in this area in the past, and I absolutely love that. So let's change our boundaries around here and name our town. And there we go. We've got the village of Hidden Brook, and I realized we needed to rename or resize rather the township of Hillview, so we have done that as well. And I want to thank you all so much for your naming suggestions. I think it really breathes life into the build, and I appreciate every single one that you guys have made. They've been absolutely fantastic. Now, if you've stuck around till this point in the video, I just want to let you know I appreciate you. Most people don't watch this long, and it means a lot to me that you did. I also want to let you know that primary voting is now underway for the governor's race. If you are a patron, a channel member, or a Twitch subscriber, hop into City Hall in the Discord and you can vote for one of the 3 candidates. And would you check out some of the flyers that are going out by some of the super PACs? It's going to be a heated race. It's a very heated race. And for everyone else, you are going to have your say as well. Voting for the primaries ends on the 16th at about 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And at that point, I'm going to put up a community poll with the 2 remaining candidates, and you guys will choose who is governor, and the build will change depending on who you vote for. So it's going to be really exciting. And with that, I think we're going to leave it here. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please consider hitting the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I just want to thank you for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. Decided to hang out with me and play some Cities Skylines 2 and build another little village here. And it's been a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's been fun for you too. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.